All right, we come now to Daniel chapter 6, part 6, a king's favorite. Well, we are in a new world empire. Oh, what a difference a chapter makes from chapter 5 to chapter 6. Nebuchadnezzar and his Babylonian empire is gone now, and there's a new world empire on the stage, the empire of the Medes and the Persians. Here in chapter 6, verses 1 through 28, we have the account of Daniel and the lion's den. One of the more famous stories, one that probably every Sunday school child knows. There's lesser known stories throughout the Bible, but this certainly doesn't qualify as one of the lesser known. It's probably one that if young people in Sunday schools listed their top 10 stories, I'd imagine this would be on those lists quite a few times. But the head of gold from the vision is no more. It has given way to the breast and arms of silver. The lion with the wings of eagles will roar no more. And in its place is this lopsided bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. We'll see that description later on in chapter 7, verse 5. So without further ado, let's get into this. All right, in verses 1 through 6, we see capital A, the king's decree. Verses 1 through 9. So then we see, first of all, verses 1 through 3, the promotion of the prophet. Verses 1 through 3. Let's read those. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom. And over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give account unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. By the way, verse 3 there, it says, then this Daniel. A man a couple years ago preached on this Daniel, or art thou that Daniel? Are you the one I've heard so much about, or the one that God makes so much about? And again, it is nice to know that God makes much about people that make much about him. Are you that Daniel? The one that follows, yes, I'm the one that follows that God, not the one that lets down the other magicians and lets down whole empires and lets down everybody. I'm talking about the true and living God, that God, the one that never has ever let anyone down ever. I'm only that Daniel because I have learned to follow that God. But then this Daniel was preferred. Okay, so Daniel was a man of unwavering integrity. I kind of wonder what it would have been like to be a ruler. You probably kind of gauge the people that you want closest to you. And there are people that you suspect that they pretend to be loyal while they work some angle. And you just wonder, you think, well, they sure act like they have my best interest at heart. But foundationally, I just know that they're looking out for themselves. I want someone who truly has my best interest in heart, that is dead to self, isn't living for self-promotion. And so Daniel, that excellent spirit that was within him, kept coming to the forefront. A leader would see that and recognize that faithfulness. Usually, people in power want to take advantage of their position, but, it didn't happen to Daniel. He was not interested in taking advantage of his position. So it says in the Bible that he wanted to lift up Daniel, that the king should have no damage. I don't know, embezzlement, anything that would hurt the king. He wanted people there that would make sure it wouldn't happen to him. So even Nebuchadnezzar recognized it with Jeremiah in Jeremiah 39:11 through 12. So he recognized Daniel and then probably heard about the supernatural happenings that Daniel had helped with. And I wonder also that he considered this deportee was not a true Babylonian. I wonder if that helped him trust him a little bit as well. So Daniel had this position. The people above him trusted him, and the people below him envied him. A church really works well when there's a common interest, the furtherance of the Lord and his work. When you have a church full of people that are interested in furthering self, then anyone that gets lifted up, other people, instead of being happy for them, are envious of them. Daniel, he just followed God, and it kept elevating him, and it didn't matter because he lived to elevate God, and God, he exalts the humble, and we see that with Daniel. Darius had organized his kingdom by setting up 120 princes, or satrapas, or we get the idea of a satrap or a prince. That's in the Greek. But satraps are these princes, and then 3 presidents over them. And so Daniel, now the octogenarian, the 80-year-old plus, was one of them, and he actually ruled over the other 2. He was preferred. He had distinguished himself above them. There was an excellent spirit in him. The Bible tells us that in chapter 120, chapter 4, verse 8, chapter 5, 11. And here we see this as well. So Darius had thoughts of making Daniel the vice-regent over the entire realm as well. Probably, presumably, very soon. And I wonder if this ploy to get rid of Daniel had to do with the timing of this upcoming probable promotion of Daniel. So the promotion of the prophet, then we see the persecution by the princes, verses 4 and 5. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault. Oh my, that's wonderful. I would hate for someone tearing my entire life apart looking for any problems. But here Daniel lived a life so full of integrity that he did have people looking for anything, and they couldn't find anything. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. What a testimony. The people under Daniel started looking for a way to be rid of him. We have always suspected that his colleagues were envious of him, but now there's no hiding it any further. It becomes very clear here. Boy, Daniel was so honest, they couldn't find anything. It's probable that they combed all the records they could find, even back to the time while he worked in the Babylonian administration. They looked for fault, corruption of any kind, or error. Anytime he neglected something he should have taken care of. The idea, we kind of see, they looked for sins of commission or sins of omission. I find it interesting that they tried both on Daniel and his friends. Here they're saying Daniel's not allowed to pray. Does he follow God enough not to omit anything, including prayer? Earlier, they told the 3 Hebrew 30-somethings to bow before a false god. Are they loyal enough to their God so that they won't commit this sin? So errors of omission or commission both point to the fact that I follow God. Here Daniel, he says, I won't leave out my prayer. I won't omit prayer. The the Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael said, we won't commit this idolatry. We're going to be loyal to God. And we're not going to omit things we should do. We're not going to commit things we shouldn't do. So it became clear to them that the only way they were going to be able to ensnare him was to use the law of his God against him. What a testimony. And of course it reminds us of Jesus. Caiaphas and the others could find nothing to accuse him of. They examined his personal and private life against the 613 commandments of the Mosaic Law and found not one infraction. They had to hire false witnesses, and finally they resorted to feigned horror at the accusation of blasphemy, where there was none. Matthew 26, 62 through 66. And we ask ourselves, will the world ever resort to such tactics to get me? Every chance they can. What hope do I have? The same God that kept watch over Daniel is on the throne today. The same God that kept watch over his son, God the Son, is still on the throne today. They tried to put the law of God against the law of the Medes and the Persians, and Daniel knew what to do about this trick. He was trustworthy, trustworthy. Proverbs 20, verse 6, the idea of men are quick to exalt themselves, but a faithful man, who can find? Proverbs 20, verse 6, there was one there, Daniel. Their whole plan was going to be built on the fact that they knew Daniel would not fail the King of Kings. Then we see the proclamation from the palace, verses 6 through 9. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, okay, a lie. It didn't include Daniel. All the presidents of the kingdom and governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing that it be not changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree. Absolute power. It's heady stuff indeed. He liked the idea of his realm praying to him alone for 30 days. Why, he spoke and armies moved. Judgments were passed. Hundreds of slaves jumped to do his bidding, and his every wish and whim was gratified instantly. This doesn't seem to indicate that he even flinched at all at the lie that everyone liked the idea. He wasn't the head of gold like Nebuchadnezzar was, who might have been able to see through this. If a petition was signed by everyone, he needed to take it seriously after all. He didn't notice that Daniel's John Hancock was missing. Oh, that's all you want? That's not so bad. I'm kind of surprised and highly flattered. Proverbs 29, verse 5, talks about flattery and the snare that it sets for one's feet. So, once he signed it into law, he couldn't go back on it. By the way, pride causes us to do some stupid things. With this decree, technically, a child couldn't ask his mother for a glass of water. Mom, I'm thirsty. Can I have a glass of water? To the lions. To the lions with the child. Did you hear what he just said? Imagine economically, politically, religiously, all the implications of the ridiculousness of this decree. So the decree of the king, then we see the devotion of the prophet, verses 10 through 17. When Daniel knew the writing was passed, I wonder if the person who told him had a snare on their face. We've got you now. We don't know from the Bible who came up to Daniel and said, did you hear? No petitions allowed from anyone above or here or beneath or anywhere, save of the king for 30 days. So what you going to do, Daniel? I guess you got a couple options. You either disobey the decree and then you die, or you hide it or stop praying, and then we go to the king and tell him, oh, you know, we kind of were all in agreement except Daniel. He didn't regard you enough to think that you were worthy of being looked to in this exalted way. He didn't sign the decree. But hey, that's not our call, is it? They thought they had him, much like they thought they had Jesus at times in the New Testament. So we've got you over a barrel, they probably thought. So what do we see here? In verse 10, we see commitment. Commitment. Daniel's commitment. So let's see it. When Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being opened in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. This was not new for him. See, in this country of ours, a lot of times people don't want to worship God until the government says you can't. You're not allowed to do this. Oh yeah, well I'm going to do that because I'm so devoted to God. And then it doesn't turn out well for them. I think a lot of the reason is they stir up devotion because now they can get some attention for not having, for having devotion at the time where it's not allowed. Here, Daniel, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like, it's like, oh, you mean the status quo is to be not for God? Well, then I'm going to be for God just so I can get a little attention for being different. No, it had nothing to do with getting a little bit of attention for himself. This was his life. It was a sincere life, a life of devotion, not look at me as I pretend to follow God now that it's not popular. No. It makes a big difference. Those words, as he did aforetime, I think, give us the secret for why this chapter turned out the way it did. Because it was a life of devotion. Would he actively please God, or would he passively please man? He did what he always did, as he did aforetime. So you can just back to the guy, the sneer. It's like, so, anyway, you're not allowed to pray. You're in trouble. You can see Daniel kind of smile and say, boy, this is serious. I better go home and pray about it. No, you missed the whole point. So he went home and he prayed about it. By the way, he opened his windows toward Jerusalem, prayed toward Jerusalem. Now, Jeremiah had prophesied that it would be rebuilt, 9:1, 25, verses 12 and 13. Had Darius already issued the decree for the rebuilding of the temple? And I'll tell you in a minute why I said that. Ezra 1 through 4. The Shekinah glory had left, Ezekiel 10:4 and 18, but it would return one day, Ezekiel 43, verse 2, on the time of the millennium. But let me read this to you. I think you'll find this interesting. Back in 1 Kings 8, we hear kind of maybe what was on Daniel's heart as he prayed toward Jerusalem. Listen to these verses. This is 1 Kings 8, and I have verse 48, but I want to back up a little bit. So here we have this prayer, and he says, he's asking God, if thy people go out to battle against their enemy, whithersoever thou shalt send them, and shall pray unto the Lord toward the city which thou hast chosen, and toward the house that I have built for thy name. Then hear thou in heaven their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. If they sin against thee, for there is no man that sinneth not, and thou be angry with them, and deliver them to the enemy, so that they carry them away captives unto the land of the enemy, far or near. Yet if they shall bethink themselves in the land whither they were carried captives, and repent, and make supplication unto thee in the land of them that carried them captives, saying, We have sinned, and have done perversely, we have committed wickedness, and so return unto thee with all their heart. That make you think of Daniel, a person who purposed in his heart to turn. Daniel was a sinner. All right, he was not a perfect man. And in this passage, there's no man that sinneth not. Daniel had repented of himself, and had purposed in his heart to make God the center of all that he did. And so return unto thee with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies, which led them away captive, and pray unto thee toward their land, which thou gavest unto their fathers, the city which thou hast chosen, and thy house, which I have built for thy name. Then hear their prayer and their supplication in heaven, thy dwelling place, and maintain their cause. Isn't this amazing? This many, many years later, this prayer, having no idea that this sounds exactly like Daniel stepping into the shoes of the one that this person was praying for, and becoming that person that had turned to God, so that God could answer that prayer way back then. So commitment. He went home and prayed, and he gave thanks. The decree of the king did not stimulate fear in him, but it activated faith. Maybe he smiled as he thought of the words of his three friends when they said, we're going to be devoted to God. 3 times daily. Psalm 55:17 talks about evening and morning, and at noon will I pray. And kneeling, Ezra 9:5 and Psalm 95 verse 6 both talk about this appropriate posture. So we see commitment. Then we see conspiracy, verses 11 through 13. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree, that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, The thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Then answered they and said before the king, That Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree which thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. They're treading very, very dangerous ground here. And I think their pride had blinded them as well. They thought they had laid a trap for Daniel, but it was the king who was trapped. And by the way, ultimately, they were the ones who were trapped. This might be one of the most perfect examples of the way it talks about when a person layeth a trap for another person, he falleth in thereat. Here they lay this whole trap. I don't know, Haman is a pretty good example where he in his hatred builds these gallows, and then he gets hung on his own gallows. So this trap for Daniel, at this point, Daniel just goes on serving God. And it's the king. Daniel, the Bible doesn't seem to indicate that Daniel was ever, oh no, what will I do? He just calmly went home and prayed. Here the king is like, oh no. All right? So it's the king. The king is the one who's disturbed, and they didn't care. I almost think of Joseph's brothers, what they put their father through to get rid of Joseph. They hated Joseph, and they didn't care what they put their father through to get rid of him. I kind of see these men here. They hate Daniel. They don't care what they put the king through. I think they're probably a little bit surprised, though, at how miserable the king was throughout this whole episode. Daniel himself was just fine. They went through every detail, acting like the whole thing was the king's idea. He doesn't regard the king or his decree. He has no respect for you or your wishes. Then we see consternation in verses 14 through 17. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. He set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men assembled unto the king, and said unto the king, Know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persians is, that no decree or statute which the king establisheth may be changed. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel, and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake, and said unto Daniel, Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. And a stone was brought, and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. This is so interesting. The most powerful man in the world, powerless before the whims of his mistake. The king did everything he could, consulting with his lawyers, looking for any type of loophole, but it was too late. Nothing could be done. And this is amazing. Here, the most powerful man in the world is comforting an aged Jew about the power of his God. Absolutely amazing. Apparently, this punishment had to be carried out the same day, and just before he was thrown in, the king reminded Daniel that he had a big God capable of deliverance. By the way, the rigidity of the Medo-Persian law was not always a bad thing. Later, in the days of Ezra, the adversaries of Judah wrote letters to Ahasuerus, the Persian king, slandering the Jews and endeavoring to have a decree signed to prevent the Jews from continuing their work of reconstruction. They succeeded in Ezra 4. Later, the decree of Cyrus was found, the original document that led to the repatriation of the Jews in the promised land. That changed the whole picture. The original decree had to stand. The law of the Medes and Persians guaranteed that. Darius threw the weight of his administration behind the original decree and added clauses that greatly helped the continuation of the work in Israel. So later on, Darius, he sees that there was a decree, so he puts the weight of his administration behind it. Ezra 5 and Esther. So, I don't know. You can see Daniel here smiling at how different this was than when Nebuchadnezzar was furious and cast the Hebrew, his friends, into the fiery furnace. Here, the king is comforting him with the power of his God as he throws him in. He was thrown in, and the stone was sealed. Clay with signet impressions to ensure the integrity of the decree. Then next, we see the deliverance of the Lord, verses 18 through 28. So this is exciting. First of all, we see the misery he showed, verse 18. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. The royal kitchens were ransacked for something that would please the king. But how can you eat when you cannot stop thinking about lions devouring your friend, crushing his bones in their jaws because of a mistake you made because of your own pride. Entertainment then? Entertainment, this is a hapax legomena. This word is only found once in Scripture, the word behind this. Then bring the music. But his merry heart was replaced with a heart of lead within his chest. Sleep? Sleep then? Let the rest of relaxation carry him away from all of this misery. And you can rest assured that with the king being miserable, the rest of the palace was miserable too. But sleep was not to be had. It fled away. He tossed and turned. And I wonder, as he lay there, he thought to himself, they lied to me. They lied to me. I cannot trust them. They have their own interests at heart, and they may have destroyed the one man who truly had mine at heart. They lied to me. They thought they were trapping Daniel, and they trapped me instead. They lied to me. I wonder if he plotted revenge as he lay there. He would close his eyes, and I wonder if he would imagine the scene that was probably playing out, humanly speaking. Was it a quick death? Did the lions play with their food? I can't sleep. No, I'll stand by the east window and wait helplessly until morning. After all, what God has ever saved someone? Nebuchadnezzar said, now who is that God that will deliver you out of my hand? Well, he found real fast. Darius here is thinking, I know he sounded pretty good. Your king will, your God will deliver you. But I'm wondering, he's what I know about my gods don't save. I sure hope this one's different. The misery he showed, and then the miracle he saw. In verses 19 through 23. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste unto the den of lions. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. Doesn't sound like he was full of faith there. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. The first crack of dawn found the king making a beeline. He was not a young man either. He was old enough to be in my jolly 60s. He was probably an early 60-something-year-old man, making a beeline to the den. So jolly 60s can actually move when there's something important to move for. Daniel, is thy God able? We see the word cried, spake, said. He called out Daniel's Jewish name, and he asked about Daniel's living God. Daniel answered with respect. He used the title, and then he said, he is able. God shut the lion's mouth. This word shut is like its Hebrew equivalent, where used back in Genesis 19, where Lot came out when the men wanted the wicked men of the city wanted the men, and he shut the door behind him and shut it behind him forcefully and said, now listen, we can't. He wasn't letting them in. He shut the door forcefully. Well, that's what God shut those lions' mouths. Daniel was a man of integrity, serving God continuously, and he was a man of integrity and innocency. Someone said the lions didn't eat him because all he was gristle and backbone. What a fun thought. But the truth is that the angel of the Lord had shut their mouths. The Bible tells us in Psalm 34:7 that the angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him. We also know that Peter saw this angel in Acts chapter 12 that delivered him while he was slated to be killed. So the next thing we see is the message he sent, verses 24 through 28. The Bible says this, "And the king commanded, and they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives, and the lions had the mastery of them." You see, unbelievers will read this and they'll say, well, yeah, they didn't eat Daniel because they probably weren't hungry. Well, we see here that that wasn't the case. The lions had the mastery of them and break all their bones in pieces or ever they came at the bottom of the den. So we see, first of all, the message he sent to the servants of Darius as he had them killed. Here's the message he kind of sent. Fellas, I'm not a good person to manipulate. And can I just point out, the man of God is a poor target. So the message sent to the servants of Darius, and then the message sent to the subjects of Darius. So there is a little bit of confusion here with Darius and Cyrus. So get this for just a second. Was Cyrus a greater king and Darius the lesser king? Was it kind of the idea of a Nabonidus and Belshazzar? What's this relationship? And this seems to be, we're not entirely 100% sure, but this seems to be a good explanation. Some suggest that there was a king, Cyrus, and a sub-king, Darius, but Thomas Strauss suggests the following. The simplest and most biblical solution to the identity of Darius is to interpret the vav conjunction and in Daniel 6:28 as even, rendering the passage Darius even Cyrus the Persian. This would indicate that the ruler over Medo-Persia had two titles, one man with two names, Darius meaning king in Persian, the Mede, and Cyrus the Persian. Of course, Daniel and his three friends had dual names as well. So this seems to be a very plausible explanation. So the message to the servants of Darius, and then verses 25 through 28, the message to the subjects of Darius. Let's read that. Then King Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwelt in all the earth. That's quite a mailing list. Peace be multiplied unto you. And again, it kind of sounds like a Pauline epistle. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever. And his kingdom, that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. This is amazing. Daniel had interpreted the dream for Nebuchadnezzar, and at the end of this image, a stone would come and break down the entire thing, and it would be turned to dust, and not even a bit of that dust could be tracked down. And Nebuchadnezzar wasn't interested at first in any other kingdom after his own. And here Darius recognizes the kingdom of this living God. that shall be endless and indomitable. He delivereth and rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, who hath delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian. To tremble and fear Daniel's God. This was the message. He is the living God, steadfast forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed. His dominion is unto the end. He delivereth, rescueth, worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth. He delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. You and I have a lion who, the devil who as a lion walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And as the devil opens his powerful jaws and tries to destroy another Christian, if that Christian will be careful to go to his God regularly, as he did aforetime, he too can find deliverance every bit as miraculous. We need it today. We need believers that will die to self, not live to work an angle, be men and women of devotion. And God will place those men and women of devotion in frightening places. But God loves to show himself bigger than those frightening places and glorify himself. If we will just put ourselves in the places where God can glorify himself. It's a wonderful place to be. It's seemingly a scary place. In the will of God, a David that finds himself facing a Goliath, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael that find themselves facing a fiery furnace, Daniel who finds himself facing the den of lions. So many people finding themselves facing a foe and finding out that their God is much greater than that foe. And encouraging me and you, how many years later, as they were faithful and God was able to glorify himself. And I can read those accounts and say, oh God, you are truly wonderful and glorious and steadfast.